Let's cut through the most famous recruiting slogan in military history and talk about what Reserve and National Guard members actually earn, because the compensation system is way more complex, way more interesting, and potentially way more lucrative than that catchy phrase suggests. If you're considering joining the Guard or Reserves, if you know someone who's serving part-time, or if you're a financial professional trying to help military families, buckle up, because we're about to break down a pay system that most people, including a lot of service members themselves, don't fully understand. 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year. You've heard it. Your recruiter probably said it. It's been the tagline for Reserve and National Guard service for decades, and technically it's accurate. That is the minimum service requirement, but here's what they don't tell you in that slogan. How you get paid for those days is completely different from active duty. The math is weird, and there are about 15 different ways your actual service and your paycheck can look nothing like that simple formula. Let me start with the basics. If you're in the Reserve or National Guard, you're what's called a traditional service member. That means you have a civilian job or you're a student, and the military is your part-time gig. But part-time is kind of a misleading term because when you're activated, deployed, or mobilized, you're working just as hard and getting paid just as much as any active duty service members. Here's how it actually works. There are basically 3 different pay situations you need to understand: drill pay, active duty pay, and AGR pay. Let's break them down one by one. First up, drill pay. This is what you earn during those famous 1 weekend a month training sessions. Now, here's where it gets interesting, and this is where a lot of people get confused. A drill isn't measured in hours the way your civilian job is. It's measured in something called a drill period, and each drill period equals 4 hours of training. Here's the key. Each drill period pays you the equivalent of 1 full day of active duty base pay. That's right. 4 hours of work, 1 day's pay. So when you show up for a typical drill weekend, Saturday and Sunday, you're completing 4 drill periods, 2 on Saturday and 2 on Sunday. Each period is 4 hours. That means you're working 16 total hours, but you're getting paid for 4 days. Let me say that again because it's important. 16 hours of actual work, 4 days worth of pay. It's honestly a pretty good deal when you think about it. This is why people say 4 days pay for 2 days work. Now, how much is that actually worth? It depends on your rank and how long you've been in service, just like active duty. Let's run some real numbers. Let's say you're an E4 specialist with 3 years of service. As of 2025, your base pay for 1 drill period, which is 1 day's worth of pay, is about $97. Multiply that by 4 drill periods in a weekend, and you're earning roughly $388 for that drill weekend. Do that 12 times a year, 1 weekend per month, and you're making about $4,656 annually just from your drill weekends. But wait, it gets better. Remember that 2 weeks a year part of the slogan? That's called annual training, or AT. During annual training, you're on active duty orders. That means you're getting paid active duty rates for every single day you're there, not drill pay. So if you're that same E4 and you do 15 days of annual training, 15 for the Guard, 14 for the Reserves, you're earning your full daily rate, which is your monthly base pay divided by 30. That's another $1,455 or so for those 2 weeks. Add it all up, drill weekends plus annual training, and you're looking at over $6,000 a year for that minimum service requirement. And that doesn't include any allowances, special pays, bonuses, or anything else. That's just the baseline for showing up and doing your job. Now, let's talk about the next level, active duty pay. This is where things get really interesting because this is when Reserve and Guard members are earning exactly the same as their active duty counterparts, sometimes even more when you factor in special pays. When do you go on active duty? There are a bunch of scenarios. The most common is deployment. If you get mobilized and deployed to a combat zone, you're now on active duty orders. You're getting full active duty pay, including basic allowance for housing, basic allowance for subsistence, and depending on where you're going, things like hostile fire pay, imminent danger pay, hardship duty pay, and even tax-free income if you're in a combat zone. Let's paint a picture. Imagine you're a sergeant in the Army Reserve, an E5 with 6 years of service. Your civilian job pays you $50,000 a year. You get mobilized for deployment to the Middle East for 9 months. Here's what happens to your income. Your active duty base pay is about $3,300 per month. Add in your basic allowance for housing. Let's say you're married with kids and you live in a mid-cost area. That's another $1,800 a month. Basic allowance for subsistence for food, that's around $460 a month. Hostile fire pay or imminent danger pay, that's $225 per month. And here's the kicker, because you're in a designated combat zone, your base pay is tax-free. Do the math. You're pulling in roughly $5,785 per month, and most of that is either tax-free or non-taxable. Over 9 months, that's about $52,000, and that's on top of whatever your civilian employer might be paying you if they offer differential pay, which a lot of federal employers and some private companies do. Oh, while you're deployed, your family back home is getting that housing allowance deposited into their account automatically. Your bills are covered. Your spouse isn't stressing about rent or the mortgage. This is why a lot of reserve and guard members actually see their income go up during a deployment, even though they're temporarily away from their civilian job. But deployments aren't the only time you go on active duty. You can also be activated for things like basic training when you first join, advanced individual training for your military job, mobilization for domestic emergencies like natural disasters or civil unrest, or special assignments like supporting a federal mission. Each time you're on active duty orders for more than 30 consecutive days, you start qualifying for the full suite of active duty benefits. That's full BAH based on your home location, full BAS, full medical coverage through TRICARE for you and your family, and access to all the same special pays as active duty members. Here's an important distinction a lot of people don't know. If you're on active duty orders for less than 30 days, like for a 2-week annual training or a 10-day school, you get something called BAH, Reserve Component Transient, or BAH RCT. This is a lower rate than regular BAH. It's not based on your specific location. It's a flat rate based on your rank and whether you have dependents. It's less money, but it's still something. Once you hit that 30-day mark, though, you jump to full BAH rates. Now let's talk about the third pay category, Active Guard Reserve, or AGR. This is the full-time gig. AGR members are Guard or Reserve service members who work full-time for the military, usually in administrative, recruiting, training, or support roles for their units. If you're AGR, you're essentially active duty, but you're still technically in the Guard or Reserves. AGR positions are competitive. They're sought after. Why? Because you get all the benefits of active duty, full pay, full medical, full housing allowance, retirement accrual, the works. But you're often stationed closer to home and you're supporting your local Guard or Reserve community. It's a sweet deal if you can get it. As an AGR member, your pay is identical to active duty. You use the same pay charts, you get promoted on the same schedule, you earn the same allowances. The only real difference is that you're technically still part of the reserve component, which matters for certain retirement and benefit calculations down the line. Here's a scenario. Say you're a traditional reservist. You do your 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year. You've been doing it for a few years and you're good at your job. And an AGR position opens up at your unit. You apply, you interview, and you get selected for a 3-year AGR contract. Suddenly, instead of earning $6,000 a year from the reserves, you're earning the full active duty salary for your rank. Let's say you're an E6 with 8 years of service. That's a base pay of about $3,800 per month. Add BAH and BAS, and you're looking at around $70,000 to $75,000 per year, depending on where you live. That's a full-time salary with full-time benefits, and you're still serving in your home state or close to it. AGR contracts are usually 2 to 3 years, but they can be extended or renewed. Some people do AGR for their entire career, racking up 20 years of active duty time and retiring with a full military pension at the end. It's a legitimate career path. All right, now let's talk about some of the nuances and complexities of reserve and guard pay that trip people up. First, the timing of when you get paid. Active duty members get paid twice a month like clockwork, on the 1st and the 15th. Reserve and guard members, it's a little different. For drill pay, you typically get paid a few days after you complete your drill weekend. So if you drill on the second Saturday and Sunday of the month, you might see that paycheck hit your account the following Friday. It's not instant. For active duty orders like annual training or deployments, you get paid on the same schedule as active duty once you're on those orders. But there still can be a delay in getting your pay started when you first get activated. And there can be issues getting your pay stopped when you demobilize. We'll get to that in a minute. Second, understanding how basic allowance for housing works. If you're a traditional reservist or guard member doing your monthly drills, you do not get BAH for those drill weekends. You only get drill pay, your base pay for those 4 drill periods. No housing allowance, no food allowance, just base pay. But when you go to annual training or any active duty orders, then you start getting allowances. And whether you get BAH RCT or full BAH depends entirely on how long your orders are. Less than 30 days, BAH RCT. 30 days or more, full BAH. This can be a significant difference in money. We're talking hundreds of dollars per month. Third, the weird math of drill periods. A lot of people assume a drill weekend is just 2 days, but it's not. It's 4 drill periods, and each period is 4 hours. That's why units can get creative with scheduling. You might have a MIUTA 4, which is your standard Saturday-Sunday week, but you could also have a MIUTA 6, which means 6 drill periods over 3 days, usually Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Or a MIUTA 8, which is 8 drill periods over 4 days. The more drill periods you complete, the more you get paid. But you're also capped at how many drill periods you can do in a given fiscal year. And there are limits on how much you can compress your training. The rules vary by service and by unit. Fourth, and this is huge, the interaction between drill pay and VA disability compensation. If you're a reservist or guard member who also receives VA disability payments, you need to know this. By law, you cannot receive drill pay and VA disability compensation for the same days. You have to choose one or the other. Here's how it works. Let's say you're a veteran with a 50% disability rating, and you're getting $1,075 a month from the VA. You join the reserves. Every time you drill or go on active duty, the VA is going to reduce your disability payment by the equivalent number of days you were on military duty. The VA will send you a form every year asking you to report how many days you served on active or inactive duty. Most veterans choose to keep their drill pay and waive their VA benefits for those specific days because the drill pay is usually higher than the prorated daily VA payment. But you have to be aware of this or you could end up with an overpayment from the VA that you'll have to pay back. Fifth, the retirement system. Reserve and guard members earn retirement credit differently than active duty. On active duty, if you serve 20 years, you retire with a pension. In the reserves and guard, it's based on a points system. You earn points for every day you serve. You get 15 membership points just for being in the reserves or guard each year. You get 1 point for each drill period, so 4 points for a drill weekend. You get 1 point for every day of active duty, including annual training. You can also earn points for correspondence courses, funeral honors duty, and certain other activities. To qualify for a good year toward retirement, you need minimum 50 points. Most traditional reservists easily hit that. If you do your standard 12 drill weekends and your 2 weeks of annual training, you're earning about 63 to 78 points per year. Here's the catch. You need 20 good years to be eligible for a reserve retirement. And you don't collect that retirement until you turn 60 years old. Unless you've been deployed, in which case you can start collecting earlier based on how many days you served on active duty. The actual amount you'll receive at retirement is calculated based on your total points, your final rank, and a formula that's way too complicated to get into here. But the bottom line is this. Reserve and guard retirement is real, it's valuable, and it's worth understanding if you're planning to serve for the long haul. Now let's talk about some of the mistakes and pitfalls people run into with reserve and guard pay. Mistake number 1. Not keeping track of your leave and earnings statement. Just like active duty, you get an LES every month, or at least every time you get paid. You need to review it. Make sure your rank is correct, your time in service is correct, your allotments are set up right, and that you're not being over or underpaid. Pay errors happen all the time in the reserves and guard, especially when you transition between drill status and active duty status. Mistake number 2, not understanding how taxes work. Your drill pay is taxable income. Your active duty base pay is taxable unless you're in a designated combat zone, in which case it's tax-free. Your allowances, BAH and BAS, are never taxable, whether you're active duty or on drill status. But you still need to report your military income on your tax return. And if you're working a civilian job at the same time, you need to manage your withholdings carefully, or you could end up owing a big chunk at tax time. Mistake number 3, assuming your civilian employer has to pay you while you're on military duty. This is not a requirement by federal law unless you're a federal employee. If you're a federal civilian employee and you get mobilized or deployed, your agency is required to pay you the difference between your civilian salary and your military pay. That's called differential pay, and it's a huge benefit for federal employees who serve. But if you work for a private company, they're not required to pay you anything while you're on military orders. Some companies do it voluntarily, some offer partial pay, some offer nothing. This is why it's so important to understand your military compensation. You might be living entirely on military pay for months or even a year during a deployment. Mistake number 4, not setting up allotments when you deploy. Remember that allotment system we talked about in the last video? It's even more important for reserve and guard members. When you deploy, you want to make sure your family back home is getting the money they need to pay bills, cover the mortgage, and keep things running. Setting up an allotment to automatically send money to your spouse's account is one of the smartest things you can do before you leave. Mistake number 5, forgetting about state benefits. This is a big one. A lot of states offer additional benefits to National Guard members, things like state tuition assistance, state tax exemptions for military pay, state bonuses for reenlistment, and more. These benefits vary widely from state to state. Some states are incredibly generous, others offer almost nothing. If you're in the Guard, you need to research what your state provides and make sure you're taking advantage of it. All right, let's bring this all together with a real-world example that shows how all of this works in practice. Meet Staff Sergeant Rodriguez. He's an E6 with 10 years of service in the Army Reserve. He works full-time as a firefighter, making $60,000 a year. He does his 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year. His annual drill pay is about $7,200. His civilian job is stable. He's got a mortgage, 2 kids, and a spouse who works part-time. In year 8 of his reserve career, Rodriguez gets mobilized for a deployment to Africa. He's going to be gone for 11 months. Here's what happens financially. His military pay jumps to about $4,200 per month in base pay. He's married with dependents, so his BAH is around $2,000 per month, depending on his location. BAS is about $460. He's in a designated combat zone for part of the deployment, so some of his pay is tax-free. Hostile fire pay adds another $225 per month when he's in the zone. Total military income during deployment, roughly $6,885 per month. Over 11 months, that's about $75,735. Meanwhile, his fire department, because he's a government employee, is paying him differential pay. They're covering the difference between his military pay and what he would have earned as a firefighter. So he's essentially still making his full civilian salary, plus the additional military allowances and tax benefits. On top of that, he's accruing retirement points at an accelerated rate. Every day of active duty is a point. 11 months is about 335 days, which means 335 points towards his retirement. That's the equivalent of about 4 years of traditional reserve service in terms of retirement credit. When Rodriguez comes home and demobilizes, he transitions back to his firefighter job, back to his drill schedule, and back to his normal life. But financially, he's crushed it. He's paid off debt, he's maxed out his savings, he's earned a year's worth of military income on top of his civilian salary, and he's significantly boosted his retirement. This is the power of understanding reserve and guard compensation. It's not just 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year. It's a flexible, scalable system that can dramatically increase your earning potential depending on how much you're willing or required to serve. Now, here's the part nobody talks about, the unpaid work. There's a dirty little secret in the reserve and guard community, and it's that a lot of service members are doing work they're not getting paid for. We're talking about emails, phone calls, administrative tasks, staying current on the training requirements, maintaining security clearances, all the stuff that has to happen between drill weekends to keep the unit running. Technically, you're supposed to be paid for this work. There are provisions for things called readiness management assemblies, which are basically mini drill periods you can use to get compensated for administrative work. But a lot of units don't have the budget or the authorization to pay for these. So soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines are doing it on their own time without compensation. It's a systemic problem, it's technically illegal, and it's widespread. If you're joining the reserves or guard, you need to know this going in. You will be expected to do some unpaid work. It sucks. It shouldn't be that way, but it is the reality. The bottom line is this: reserve and guard compensation is complex, multifaceted, and offers incredible opportunities if you know how to navigate it. You can earn a solid part-time income during your minimum service requirement. You can dramatically boost your earnings through deployments, active duty orders, and AGR positions. You can stack military pay on top of a civilian salary and build wealth faster than you ever could in just one job. But you have to understand the rules. You have to track your pay. You have to know when you're entitled to allowances, how drill periods work, how the retirement system calculates your points, and how to avoid the common mistakes that trip people up. For financial professionals working with reserve and guard families, this knowledge is essential. You cannot advise someone on their finances without understanding how their military pay works, especially if they're about to deploy or if they're transitioning between drill status and active duty. And for anyone considering joining the reserves or guard, don't just listen to the recruiter's pitch. Do your homework. Understand what you're signing up for. 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year is the floor, not the ceiling. The real experience and the real compensation can be wildly different.